Welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. We've all heard those horror stories about little Indian children who were shipped off to boarding school not speaking any English, and they were punished. Their mouths were washed out with soap or whatever for speaking their own language, and that it was a rather brutal experience for them. It may have been a pretty large factor in the beginning of the loss of Indian languages. But in recent weeks, I've been talking to some of the people who went to boarding schools, and I've been visiting boarding schools and reading and doing other research, and I found out there's a little bit more to the picture than that boarding schools were not entirely an evil thing, although in fact the washing out of mouths with soap did happen, especially in the early days. I'd like to show you some excerpts of what I learned this week. The earliest education in Oklahoma was provided by Indian schools. The map is dotted with the sites of schools built in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Some were run by missionaries, some by the United States government, and some by a partnership of the two. Indian students were taught English and the 3 R's. There was also an emphasis on farming, domestic arts, and trades. The problem was, many of these schools, especially those run by the United States government, weren't just trying to give something to young Indian students, they were trying to take something away from them, their cultural and linguistic heritage and their ethnic identity. In most cases, students were forbidden to speak their own languages. The overall idea was to assimilate the students to white ways, including hairstyles, clothing, and occupation, as well as language.
The policies of the United States toward Native American languages is well documented. The policy described in 1887 by then Commissioner of Indian Affairs, J.D.C. Adkins, and these were his words: "The instructions of Indians in vernacular is not only in no use to them, but is detrimental to the cause of education and civilization, and will not be permitted in any school over which the government has any control or in which it has any interest whatever." And this is the President of the United States, President Grant, declared Indian children be required to attend school, and their barbarous dialect be blotted out and the English language substituted. As the result of these past policies of reprimanding Chickasaw students for speaking their own language in schools funded by the government, the younger generation is incapable of speaking their mother tongue.
They had the Pawnee Indian boarding school out here east of town, and that really hurt our tribe, I guess, especially with the language and a lot of ceremonies and things like that. When they went out there, basically you couldn't talk your language. I was told stories that you would get whipped, and things like that if you talked the language, and it kind of pretty much brought an end to a lot of these tribal ways, ceremonies and language, things like that. A lot of the ones that are fluent didn't go to the school out there, They may have went to another school, other places, or maybe the students that did go out there that are fluent, maybe they grew up, with their family that were real fluent, where they had to learn how to talk, So that's probably what hurt our tribe the most, was the boarding school.
During the 50s and previous to that, the parents of that particular generation, and my parents as well, were products of boarding schools. And the experiences that they received at the boarding schools, of course, led to the language not being spoken much in that particular time and currently now because of the boarding school concept not wanting them to speak the language. And of course, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the experiences that they've had or that previous generations have had in the boarding schools. And so my parents basically wanted us to be able to go to the elementary schools and be able to fit in so far as language and everything else. So again, it was up to us to pick up the language.
Actually, Indian students were not always punished for speaking their language. They didn't punish you for it?
No, they didn't. We spoke on the playgrounds. We talked to each other on the playgrounds. And
Were all of your classmates Creek speakers, or most of them? Or?
most of us. I wasn't the only one that wasn't able to talk English. There was others that come there that couldn't talk English. And for a while there, we'd have to have an interpreter, an older student, to interpret for us. But it was all right after, when you learned English.
Going to boarding school could be, in some ways, an exciting adventure.
He put me on his back and somehow tied the box to his belt in his in the other suitcase and carried me 4 miles to the school.
Must have been quite a picture.
I was on his back and went out through the arch. I remember looking up at the arch as we passed through it, and then I looked, and of course the campus had lights, so there was lights there, and I could see these buildings. And I went back to sleep before he got across the campus, and then I woke up when he took me to the building, the grade school building, which is called Little Boys Building then, and he was in the Big Boys Building. So we went to the Little Boys Building, and next morning, real early, the 5 o'clock, the bell rung, and I've never gotten up that early before, so it was early to me, and I was still sleeping. They rested. I guess it was around 2 o'clock when we got there, and I had to get up at 5 o'clock, and boy, that was real early. I was still sleeping. They showed me where to go and wash my hands, and we lined up outside, out there in cold. And
now, all this showing, they weren't supposed to be talking Choctaw to you, right?
That's
so I guess
right.
people were talking this foreign language to you and pointing you in the right direction.
As a matter of fact, I met the boy that helped me out, and he went there when he was a baby, and we sort of got to be buddies, I guess. I couldn't speak English, and he couldn't speak Choctaw, but we, as kids would do, they got along just fine. And
The school life of Parrish Williams shows the variety of the Indian boarding school experience.
1917, I went to school here and had a reservation school here, government school we called them. Ponca Reservation School. Ponca School. When I was 5 years old. But the fall of 1919, well then I went to Pawnee Indian School. Well, while I was there at Ponca, I started in they call it chart class. Then there was a teacher we had, her name was Miss Colreal. I don't know whether she was there when the school first started in 1884, but she was my teacher, chart class. And she was a rough teacher. She used to make us say dog. And when she said dog, well, she said dog. And if we didn't say it right, well, then sometimes she'd tell us, she'd point at that dog picture on the chart, the dog on the chart. She'd point at that dog, and then she'd say, well, say that, dog. And when we get to say, we said, Shinuda. And we talk, cause we did Ponca. That's all I knew was Ponca language. I didn't know that other language them days. Ponca language. But finally I got to learn how to say dog. The way she wanted us to say it. Dog and cat. And that's where she learned us how to talk English. Then when we lived there, well then there was an Indian woman. She was our matron. They called her matron. I don't know what tribe she was. She was either Potawatomi or Shawnee. But her name was Miss Rulo. Then sometimes she'd catch us talking our language, talking Ponca. Then she'd take us in the washroom. There were 4 or 5 of us, line us up and make up. And she'd wash our, a stick of soap, one of them ivory soap, in our mouths, and then she'd wallow it around in our mouths. I don't know what she was trying to do with it. I guess wash this language out of my mouth or something. But anyhow, many times she done that to us, try to wash this Ponca language. But anyhow, from there, well, then I went to Pawnee Indian School. Stayed there 2 years. And then, but there was, they didn't mind us talking our language there. Then from there, well, then we went to Cantonment, Cheyenne country. Went there and stayed there for 2 years. But then, as far as we began to learn talking English then, in different grades that we had. I think I was in the 3rd grade, 3rd or the 4th grade when I left Cantonment, the Cheyenne Indian School. Went to Chilocco. And I went to Chilocco. I stayed there 8 years there at Chilocco. Started there at 5th grade. They had 4 homes there. They called that school the dormitory I stayed in. That was an original school. That Chilocco Indian School. They had that used to be where my uncle went to school. There, everybody went there. The teachers, children. They had that dormitory for everybody. Went in that one building there, dining room, everything was in that one building. Then finally they built that Home 3. Home 3, then they transferred the girls over there. Then eventually they built Home 4 for the girls. Then they had Home 2, Home 1. Home 1 for the boys. So they had 4 dormitories there, 2 dormitories for boys and 2 for the girls. Up until about I imagine around 1932, they had that Home 5. They built a dormitory for the girls. I think they started using that during the 1932. Then later on, in 1930, before I finished there, after I finished there, 1933, they had another building there, the dormitory. They called it Home 6. That was for the boys. Discipline. They learned us discipline and be on time. And then when we went anywhere, or when we went to work, or when we went to meals, they had a bugle. And they had a fellow by the name of Flea Johnson, then Manual Knife Chief, then there's another boy, there's 3 buglers. Then when we woke up in the morning, they woke us up along by 5:30 in the morning. They blew the, then that morning bugle, when we woke us up, beat it. That bugle, they put words to that bugle call, that early morning bugle call.
Reveille.
Yeah, reveille. They call it reveille. That reveille. But they put words to that. Them boys, somebody did. I don't know when, but they used to sing that song sometime.
How did that go?
Yeah, I can't get 'em up. I can't get 'em up. Too much government gravy makes 'em fat and lazy. They used to sing that. That reveille, that morning. Yeah, they had that. They used to sing that song. Then we got up at 5:30 and went and washed. Then about 6 o'clock, we was ready to go for breakfast. 6:30, we went in there for breakfast. Then we come out and then fixed our beds. 7 o'clock, well then we was ready for whatever we had to go to. 8 o'clock, they didn't have no bugle at that time. They had a whistle. They had from the powerhouse, they call it, the power plant. They had there where they generated electricity and steam for the radiators throughout the dormitory. We had steam heat. So that 8 o'clock, well, about 10 minutes till 8, they blow the whistle for us to be ready to go to work, or we'd be going to work. 8 o'clock, well then, that 10 minutes to get to our wherever we was going to work, maybe clear out to the Horseborn. It was about almost a half a mile from the dormitory to the Horseborn, or wherever we had to go. It's some of them places quite a ways, so they give us at least 10 minutes to get there. So they blow the whistle 10 minutes before 8. Then 8 o'clock, we're supposed to be at our jobs, or then the kids that was supposed to be going to school. Well, then at that 8 o'clock, so then they start to go to school. Everywhere we went, we had to march. We were just really regimented. Yeah, anything we done. Yeah, then when we addressed like our employee, we said yes sir, no sir, or anyhow. Only thing we didn't do is salute the officers.
Do you think all that discipline was good?
Well, it was. Yeah, you had respect for each other. Yeah, you had a respect for each other. Yeah, them boys, like the officers, well then, when they told us to do something, we didn't question them. Yeah, everything was discipline. We learned that. Then.
What about this thing of unity among the students? You want to say a little bit about that?
It was really a unity. When they got to doing something, well then it wasn't. Now if they had something they have to do collectively, well then the whole bunch got to it. You know, whatever they like clean the campus, with the boys battalion, they'd go get out there and then it wouldn't be for maybe an hour. They have the whole campus cleaned up, picking up trash. So it was something there that we learned them days, and we didn't question. We didn't ask no questions, because if you did, well then you got punished, so you just kept your mouth shut. But all the questions you wanted to ask, you didn't ask them. But then, looking back at it now, Al, it seemed like I learned a lot. Now it's like I was telling you at noon there that we used to hear that during the war, brain wars. And I guess we were brainwashed that time to do certain things. And we done it, that thing had to be done at a certain time, then a certain hour. And we done that. When that time come, we were there to do whatever detail there was to be done. Yeah, we were there to do it, and we didn't ask no questions.
What about language at Chilocco? Did they give you a hard time about speaking Ponca there?
No. Well, I was at home one. Then my brother John and his age group, they're at home too. Then once in a while we talk Ponca. I don't know why, we just didn't talk Ponca when we got together. And that's what it was at Chilocco. Well, every Indian school I went to, we quit talking our language. We started using this language here.
What other trades did they teach people there?
Well, it's mostly agriculture. Now, they stressed agriculture more than mechanical things there. They had car mechanic shop there, plumbing shop, electrician, carpenter shop, regular building carpenter, then repair carpenter shop. Then, what else? But then mostly farming. They had a lot of that agriculture. Now they had that. Where I worked, they call it nursery. It's an orchard. I worked out in the orchard, took care of the fruit trees and gardens. They call it nursery. That's where I worked. So then there was farming, regular general farming. Then there was what they call plot farming. So some boys had 80 acres. Then they farmed that the year round. That was their I forgot what they call them boys, plot farmers. They had plots of 80 acres. Then they call them plot boys. But they stayed there and farmed the year round. They gave them 80 acres to farm that land. Then they had the stock cattle there. So if you want to be a stockman, cattleman, then they had the hog barn where you could raise hogs there. Then the poultry yard. So it was all a regular agricultural school. They had everything. Then they had sheep there for a while till them Navajos come there. The Navajos run them out of sheep business. And one Saturday, when he got us together, he said in 2 years he was going to retire. His name was A.Y. Waddell, Arthur Y. Waddell. He said, I'm going to retire in 2 years, and I'm going to pick a couple of you boys here, maybe 3 of you boys to continue my working out here, because I don't want no outsider to come in, take care of these trees. He was really, I don't know, them trees are just like his family. So he picked men, one Cherokee boy, Levi Tucker. Then in spring of 31, sometime during the winter, they sent for some trees. They called them Chinese elm. They looked like, not like we got these elms here, but native elm. But these were Chinese elm. Then they sent for some. They were about, I guess 3 or 4 years old when they brought them out to brought them to Chilocco. Then we had a nursery out there where we planted them. Then the spring of 31, spring of 31, they were old enough, about 2 years old, 2 or 3 years old. So we transplanted them. He said they wanted them trees planted on each side of the road from the arch clear down to the hospital there. It's almost about a mile, I guess, from the arch to the hospital. So he told men Levi we had to do the planting. Before he left, he was telling men Levi, he said, one day you two will grow up, then have children, and maybe you'll bring your grandchildren up here and you'll tell them you'll plant this. You planted these rows here, these trees here along the side of the road. To him, that was something there that he was wanting to make us feel good, I guess. But then we were young them days, around about, Levi was about 16, I was about 18. And then after he got out of hearing sight, well, I told Levi, I said, well, that man's crazier than hell. I said, now who's going to have grandchildren? Yeah, then that was before we even thought about it, just barely going with girls there that liked us to go with us. But anyhow, well then, years later, several years, a good many years later, I done just exactly what he said. I took my oldest grandson, I showed him that. I said, Rick, I want to show you something. I took them kids over there at Chilocco, and I got him off. Instead of getting one of them kids, ours off, I told my grandson, I said, Rick, get off. I said, I'm going to show you something. Then I got off and I said, you look down this road here. See if you can see one of them trees out of line. And he looked there. You were just about 5, 6 years old. He looked there. Then he said, no, Grandpa, he said, they look like they're all in line. I said, I planted them. And when I said that, I thought about what Mr. Waddell was saying. You're going to show your grandchildren that you planted those trees. And he wasn't lying. Now that school, it was a wonderful school after looking back at it. And after I finished and I going out in this world here, and I met some of them schoolmates that I went to school there with, and I run on to lawyers, doctors, and then even policemen, highway patrolmen. They made something of themselves. I don't know, we just enjoyed ourselves there. We just enjoyed ourselves going to school there. Just fellowship, companionship.
So it's ironic that the throwing together of so many Indian students from all across the country in the boarding school environment actually served to foster a feeling of pan-tribal unity and actually increased Indian identity.
What I was going to say a while ago, when we Indians get together, we enjoy ourselves. Whether we're from, I don't care where, Washington State, Maine, but then Indian. Long as they're Indian, they're together. Well, then they've got something in common. If they're there for school, well, then they're going to help one another, go to school.
Some students did manage to keep their language in spite of the pressures against it.
Well, one reason is I still had my parents, and when I was sent back home during the summertime, well, I spoke nothing but Choctaw at home.
Did you?
And some of the people that had gone to other boarding schools said that they were punished severely for speaking.
Did they do that in your school? Oh, that's good. Did they let you speak it, or did they just?
No, they never did know we were talking about this. A girl, she and I went through school together, and we both spoke it. And we talked to each other all the time.
That's good.
And I think that's the only way that I retained mine.
I'm glad they weren't as strict there as they were someplace.
They may have been if we were taught. If we were taught, they probably would have or punished us or something.
They prohibit us from talking Kiowa under certain punishment that we get caught by any of the employees. But we did a lot of undercover Kiowa talking, especially when we are playing out of the school ground up on the mountain, behind the mountain.
I hope you enjoyed those stories as much as I did. Doesn't history mean a lot more when you can hear it from the people who were there and when you can see the places where history was made? Join us next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.